Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today I'm doing something that I have not done in a while, an individual album review, the first one of 2026. And today I'm discussing the newest album from Departure called Work of Artist I Love You. Now, I have been trying to make it my goal to put more effort into this YouTube channel in 2026, or at least put more effort into the aspects of this channel that I feel deserve more effort. And as a result, I've been trying to listen to more music this year than I did last year, which so far I'm succeeding at, and not only listening to, but also reviewing more than I did last year. And with that also comes the reality that I might have to accept some reviews being more low effort than others. Hopefully making more individual album reviews, but as a result recognizing that some albums will make my mini review posts without me really listening to them a whole lot, or particularly closely or in depth, which I'll usually admit in the review if I did kind of half-ass it. And another aspect of that New Year's resolution is trying to explore more genres and a wider variety of music. And one genre that I want to listen to more and review more this year is hip-hop. And here comes the inescapable acknowledgement that I basically avoided hip-hop in 2025. And it's not that I wanted to, nor that I really had to, all things considered. But 2025 was a weird year for me, and I was trying to figure out so much shit in my personal life that I didn't end up spending as much time on this YouTube channel, and thus I didn't really feel like putting a ton of effort in to try and review hip-hop albums, as it's a genre where lyrics play such a big role, and there's usually a lot of lyrics. I mean, yeah, there are obviously rappers whose music isn't really about the lyrics, but generally speaking, lyrics play a bigger role in hip-hop than they do in most genres. So while artists like Billy Woods, Open Mike Eagle, Not Really, and McKinley Dixon made my year-end list of my favorite albums of 2025, I often didn't really feel a lot of motivation to put out full, in-depth reviews of their albums, even though two of those albums I did mini-reviews for. And it's because as much as I respect hip-hop and can respect its importance both culturally and in terms of musical artistry, and I do love a lot of hip-hop music, it is a genre I don't have a great understanding of, which is something that I want to work on improving, but it is a slow, ongoing process, and thus I often feel like I'm doing something wrong as a music critic to try and review hip-hop albums when I feel like I'm almost definitely going to completely miss the mark and get it all completely wrong. And as a result, I just usually didn't have much of anything interesting to say in my hip-hop reviews. See my failed mini review of Little Simz' Lotus from last year if you want an example. And as a result of all that, I just ended up listening to less hip-hop than I would have liked last year, considering how much of the music that I listen to is in order to review it. But I also do realize that if I want to understand hip-hop music better and become more knowledgeable of the genre, one of the best ways to do that is to actually listen to more of it, and that's something I maybe didn't put enough thought into in previous years. And in doing so, I also need to be okay with reviewing hip-hop albums without necessarily understanding everything about them. There's going to be details I miss, potentially some things I misinterpret, and I think the most important thing for me is admitting in these videos that you take all of what I'm saying for what it is, and not like I'm trying to be some sort of expert. So I saw some intriguing descriptions of this new album from Departure, an up-and-coming rapper from Texas making abstract hip-hop, and he's only 18 years old and already multiple albums into his rap career. So I decided I wanted to try and give this a proper review where I give the lyrics a proper look and try my best to understand as much of this as I can, without completely sacrificing too many things in my life by just trying to find out everything I possibly can about one album. And admittedly, while this all was the plan for me all along with this album, it was originally intended to be done in a mini-review. But I eventually realized that after a few listens, I was sure I wanted to make this its own separate review. Because, well, partially because the album's excellent, but also because it's the kind of well-thought-out, complicated album that packs so much meaning into its fairly short running time, where there's multiple concepts throughout, which circle back to each other and reveal more and more about this album with each listen. Hence why this review is so goddamn late. But going back to what I said earlier about not understanding every line and all the full meanings of every track, well, it's absolutely worth noting that one of the main concepts in this album is what Departure has called intentional inaccessibility. In large part inspired by the writings of David Foster Wallace, he has intentionally made this impossible for anyone but himself to fully understand, because he's the only person who's lived his own life. And I feel like it is important to mention that I'm not very familiar with David Foster Wallace. I looked him up and saw some very disturbing allegations, although that's obviously not the side of Wallace that Departure is comparing himself to. Rather, David Foster Wallace, the writer. And he's sampled and quoted on this album, including at the very start of the opening track, Rap Game David Foster Wallace, which is a title Departure has given himself. And the sample here is Wallace making the statement that most really great artists are really great because they're entirely themselves, which feels very fitting as a thesis statement for this album. Now, I think for an album like this, it's especially fair of me to review it with the acknowledgement that I might completely misinterpret certain parts of the album, but I'm okay with that. If you think I completely misunderstood anything, feel free to let me know, but I am going to try my best, and yes, a lot of this art is just my interpretations. It's not meant to all just be some objective like, oh, this is definitely what this is all about. But on the topic of that opening track, I think it's a very fitting way to start this album, as Departure raps about his own unique self, where he doesn't shy away from making commentary about the current state of America, calling out ICE for being the horrible shit show that it is, but it's all through his perspective as the only version of himself, which he is very proud to be, while also acknowledging that we're all still growing and changing. Or to put it in his words, we gonna be carcasses till we hit our word targets. And while this isn't the only mention of a carcass on this album, it is interesting how he later describes himself as just another carcass when they add me to the pile on And the Fat Cats Will Fall, where he seems to be talking about a literal dead body rather than the opening track where I take it more to be describing framework. And the latter song that I mentioned is arguably, the song And the Fat Cats Will Fall, which I just mentioned, is arguably the closing track on this album. For the purpose of this review, I am including The Machine Kills All Opposition as part of the album, which, by the way, also mentions carcasses, even though it says it's a bonus track, because I couldn't find a version of this album without it anywhere. But all that I mentioned seems to be an allusion to the passing of time, where we all start out as not being our complete selves, but do we ever become our complete selves? Because if there's always room for growth and improvement and new opportunities, then eventually we just run out of time to do all the things that we want to do. It's a very harsh reality, but there's no way to change it. Now, there are a lot of other words and themes that appear multiple times throughout this album, and I watched an interview that Departure did on the YouTube channel The Aux Rap Music and Interviews, in which he discussed 8 primary concepts on this album. I'm not going to go over all of them in this video, but I wanted to mention this because it's basically proof that there are recurring themes throughout this album, which was already pretty obvious from some of the similar lyrics across some of these songs. But I also find it interesting how Departure approaches self-confidence on this album, and it's in kind of an oddly restrained way. Oh, don't get me wrong, it's absolutely there. He seems to be calling himself the greatest rapper in Austin on And the Fat Cats Will Fall, and he keeps alluding to the idea that his music is way deeper and more meaningful than it might appear on the surface, a recurring critique he makes of the audience across lots of this album, along with multiple mentions of stupid people, where it's clear Departure does not consider himself a part of that group. And based on this album, I would absolutely agree, he's not stupid at all. Far from it. But this self-confidence is juxtaposed with a lot of existential dreads in certain moments, especially like on the song Dada as Language of Art, one of the best songs on this album, which not only has some sharp commentary on excuses that people make for their shitty behavior, another recurring theme I found throughout a lot of this album, but then in the second verse, he's willing to call out posers who pretend to care about issues, but then change their mind without a justified reason. But he also is starting to question everything about reality, and it becomes hauntingly bleak to imagine how that might affect some people. In reality, it probably does for a lot of people, unfortunately. Actually, I'm sure it does. We know it does. And yet Departure is staying grounded in reality, where he's willing to acknowledge everything as it is, not as we want it to be. But the existential questions are still there, where sometimes you wonder how real you are, or what it even means to be real. And right after that track is materialist raps in regards to loneliness. Really, it's an absolutely amazing 1-2 punch in the middle of this record, from the song before it to this one. But this song starts with another sample of David Foster Wallace. Well, in this case, a reading of Wallace's writing, I think, if I understand correctly. But anyway, the reading is about how the content we take in often says more about us than the art itself. And then from there, Departure shows us how trying to be someone else that you're not, or trying too hard to fit in, can often have really bad consequences. And he also acknowledges that loving yourself is the most important thing you can do, and that's something he wishes he knew at a younger age. And I find it interesting that he brings all this up, considering he mentions toward the end of this record that he found himself trying to emulate the artistry of David Foster Wallace. To quote the song And the Fat Cats Will Fall, finding out my person by cosplaying as a Wallace. And maybe it means he's discovered some of the consequences of it, but I think it's more likely that he's acknowledging we need other people to influence us. After all, nothing is completely original, and we're all taking ideas from other people. And that brings us to Potentially, another super fascinating song in this album, which after an excellent guest verse from Hi Girlfriend, Departure continues the love song by singing to a mystery person and how much he loves this person. And like in the song that inspired it, I Used to Love Her by Common, the person Departure is rapping about isn't a person at all, rather the genre of hip-hop. And he acknowledges the complicated relationship he's bound to have with hip-hop as a white person in a predominantly black genre that has become such an important part of black culture, where the metaphor of the person being a different race from him is really striking in the way he draws that parallel of not being able to see the other perspective, even if he can still love and appreciate it for all that it is. And I think that's basically the main point of this album. The idea that all of us are living our own unique life, where nobody else can see our perspective, and no matter how much we try to learn about other people and other cultures, the bubbles we live inside can't be popped, only expanded, but never broken. And look, there's a lot more detail I could go into on a lot of the lyrics, especially considering just how many clever individual lines there are, which I'll probably just let you hear for yourself, including what seem to be a lot of made-up words on Forgotten in the Sea, and there's some real strong cleverness there too. But look, I can only praise an album like this so much on lyrics alone, when there is so much more going on to pay attention to, and thankfully the production, instrumentation, and samples are absolutely brilliant. I do think this album unfortunately starts off on a bit of a weaker note, with an opening track that sounds more like a typical experimental rap song in a way that emphasizes glitchiness rather than having a lot of impact, and the mixing on that track buries the vocals more than I would have really liked. It's still a really good song with a lot of great commentary in the lyrics, but it's probably the weakest song here. Thankfully, from that point on, there is so much to love in this album sonically, and it's not just excellent, but it feels forward-thinking in ways that I think push boundaries. Maybe I just haven't heard enough like this, I'm not sure, but I was absolutely amazed by the creativity all across this album, where the emphasis is put on the lyrics and subtly captivating rap flow, but the little instrumental details provide so much more feeling. Whether it be the gorgeous drone synths of Potentially that make the emotional aspects of the song even more prevalent, the clutter of data as language and art, which adds so much to that song's confusion at so many things. The baby sounds were also very fitting for that song. And the absolutely awesome clunk of the percussion on 97 Camry, which could have felt really out of place on a different song, but really makes this album's #1 pure banger. And I should also mention, this is the first ever rap verse by Departure's friend JDMM, and it's really, really good. I would not have guessed this was his first rap verse. And oh, Whisper is probably one of the most experimental songs here, and also probably one of the most forward-thinking musically, where it might have to be heard to be believed. I'm not sure it was my absolute favorite song here, but it is the song that had me convinced this album was the real deal. And all of this being said, it is worth mentioning the album does have a bit of a bleak ending, where Departure realizes that there are going to have to be negative consequences if we're going to create a world where everyone can get along and violence can be stopped and everyone has access to basic human rights. Honestly, I think it's a theme throughout the album. And he's also well aware of how some people, especially on the right, misunderstand that mindset and try to twist the reality of who our real saviors are. But this album isn't some pessimistic wallow in the problems of the world. It seems to me that Departure on this album is trying to influence people to be more like him, even if he doesn't explicitly say it. Because in setting examples, we can all find little nuggets of other people's stories that resonate deeply with us. and maybe we can gain more insight into other aspects of those people we already sort of understand and empathize with. No, he's not perfect, nobody is, but he's not claiming to be. And when I say it feels like he wants more people to be like him, it doesn't mean he's trying to be copied. No, I think that's about the last thing he wants. He makes it very clear that being your own unique self is extremely important. But people take influence from other people, which is arguably just as important. And if that cycle continues, I mean, there's so many ways that could go, and it sometimes goes off the rails, but without it, we'd all be lonely. And I don't think any of us like that outcome. And if you can't tell, I think this album is absolutely phenomenal. Easily a 9 out of 10 for me, and it's probably going to wind up as one of the very best albums of this year. I know it's early, but this album is absolutely incredible. Full of endless clever lines, thought-provoking ideas, catchy choruses, and a sense of hope amidst the horrors of the world, without losing touch with reality. And it's the kind of album that needs to be heard to be properly understood. But again, there is only one person who fully understands this album. So my question to you is, how do you relate to it? Or insert any other closing statement for an album review, like, thanks for watching, please leave a comment letting me know what you thought of my review and or the album, or don't leave a comment if you don't want to, it's up to you. But I'm happy to hear what you all thought of this album and or what you thought of my review. I do know that a lot of my interpretations of this album were kind of maybe a little bit of a stretch, some of them. I do think I caught on to some of the ideas that he was talking about, not only from watching that interview that he did, but also just from reading the lyrics on the album. I do think I got more of a sense of, what some of the potential meanings of this album are, and I don't want to, unintentionally misinterpret some idea that Departure had on this album and start coming up with theories about, oh, this is what he's trying to say, when maybe it's not at all what he's trying to say. But again, I could be wrong about a lot of the stuff that I talked about in this video. I also do feel pretty confident about some of the things that I feel like I discovered from analyzing the lyrics. So again, if I missed anything or if you think I misunderstood anything, feel free to let me know. Art is open to interpretation. There's a song on this album where he literally says, I open to interpretation. But anyway, I think you all get my point at this point. Thank you so much for watching this video. Feel free to let me know if there's any other albums that you want me to review. Ideally, albums that came out in 2026. But I'm open to other suggestions as well, or other videos that you think would be cool. I want to do more than just basic album reviews. I am working on, I do have some other things planned. Some sort of in the same vein, some a little bit different. But we'll see when or even if those end up getting posted, because I am busy with a lot of these reviews, and I think I've said everything I need to say at this point. I think I can end this video now. But yeah, thank you for watching. I appreciate everyone who watches my content, and I will see you all soon.